Hello, book friends. I'm Jen, and welcome to my reading life, and welcome to the first in a series of bookish conversations with some of my favorite bookish people. Today's guest is somebody whose book tastes align almost perfectly with my own. I think you are really going to love hearing all that she has to share about her book life today. So please join me in welcoming Meg. Hello, book friends. I have a special guest here today to talk about all of her favorite book things. And please give a warm welcome to Meg from Meg's Reading Room. Welcome, Meg.
Hello. Thank you for
Hi.
having me. I'm a big fan.
Oh, as am I. For those of you who don't know, Meg has recently started the most lovely podcast. It is my new favorite thing to listen to on Wednesday mornings. And if you aren't already following Meg on her podcast, you absolutely should be. But Meg, before we dive into anything about your podcast, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your current season of life?
So my name is Meg. I am a mom to two little boys. I'm a wife. My husband is a librarian, which helps me in many ways. I work full time at a university. So I'm an advisor and an assistant in a graduate program. And then I just started a podcast because I didn't have enough on my plate. So that's been a really exciting new adventure for me. Yeah, I'm a homebody. Um, I love family and home and reading, obviously.
Mhm.
So, yeah, those are some things about me.
Wonderful. I have to say that I am so very impressed that you are starting this new podcast venture at this season of your life because I remember those days of having littles, and it's so tiring and just all consuming. And I'm just curious, like, what has the process been for you? Like, what was there something that inspired you to get started to do this? Tell us a little bit about how this all came to be.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of time and I don't sleep a lot. So it really, like, I joke that this was like the worst time to do something like this, but I
Mhm.
think that's probably why I did it. It was like I just really wanted to. I started a Bookstagram this year. I've had them before and then I would delete them. Like I didn't feel like I could just keep it going. It never felt like I never really made enough connections to be consistent with it. But this year
Mhm.
I went for it and I started building connections and community. And I noticed like I would have some more followers and then some really great conversations with them. And as it started to grow, I thought like, oh, like maybe, I've always wanted to make a podcast. My husband has a podcast for his library. So he's a librarian. He has his own podcast for the library. So he kind of knew, he does know how to do
Mhm.
it. So I thought like, okay, he can help me and maybe I can do this. And it would be a way to dive deeper and make better connections with these people that I'm starting to be friends with.
Mhm.
And we can talk about books even more. And it it is working. I am really developing some beautiful connections and like being here with you. Like this is
Yes.
an amazing thing for me. So it's something like I don't have a lot of time. I'm running on probably 4 hours of sleep every day. And it's a lot of work to have guests write episodes, put them together, edit them, post them.
Mhm.
But it's so good for my spirit too, because I have a community now and I have a creative outlet and it's a way to share my voice in a new way.
Mhm.
Um, I was a communications major. I never really did. I mean, I communicate all day. So I do use that
Mhm.
degree. But this is like what I wanted to do
Mhm.
for a very long time. And I'm finally doing it. So I'm proud of myself for trying because it's hard to try something new, as you know.
Absolutely. I all the applause to you and all the kudos for setting aside this time and space for yourself to do something just for you. I know oftentimes as women, as wives, as mothers, we can often lose ourselves in the shuffle a little bit. And I think that it's really wonderful, especially at the place you're in your life right now, that you are creating a space that's just for you, for something that you love, that has, really nothing to do with that other aspect of your life. And I think that's so important that all people can find that outlet for themselves, and it's lovely that you have the ability to do that. And again, I applaud you because I would have probably just been taking a nap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Nap sounds good.
Oh, doesn't it? Oh, naps are the best. Naps are the
Yeah.
best.
But in some weird way, this like energizes me even more
Yes.
than sleep.
Hmm.
So that's, it's been very helpful to
That's
have
so
this space for myself.
That's so true. I do. I find that being a part of this lovely bookish community, it really does. It brings me so much joy. And like you said, just kind of gives you that little boost, right? Especially you have a lovely conversation with somebody, or you, engage in some way or have a comment from someone. And it just does really kind of lift me up. And I appreciate that. So, but in addition to the podcast, because we are here to talk books, let's talk a little bit about your reading life. Can you share, have you always been a reader? Is that something that's always been part of your life? And what does your reading life look like these days?
Hmm. So when I was a kid, my mom would take me to the library.
Mhm.
I loved the Scholastic Book Fair at school and like independent reading time. So I loved Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley Twins. And I loved high school summer reading. I liked being given a list and
Mhm.
told what to read. And then I would say my reading really kicked off in my 20s,
Mhm.
when I started like going to the bookstore by myself and browsing the shelves and just finding something that struck me. Like I found Mary Oliver, who's my favorite poet. I read a lot of spiritual books.
Mhm.
I was a yoga teacher. So, like, that all kind of went together. I read a lot of nonfiction.
Mhm.
I wanted to be a children's librarian. I read a lot of children's literature, and I still do, middle
Mhm.
grade. Um, and then when I became a mom for the first time, right when the pandemic started.
Mm.
So, like, to the day, like, almost like
Oh my
it was
goodness.
like the worst week. It was in April of 2020. So it was like the
Oh,
worst week here in New York. And there was a lot that came with that. So
sure.
yeah, and you would think that that would not be the time to like get into reading, maybe could like
Mhm.
adding something, but I became um, a fiction reader. I mean, I was reading fiction, children's
Mhm.
books, but contemporary fiction I started reading because of celebrity book clubs. Like that
Mhm.
was getting popular at the time with Read with Jenna and Reese's Book Club. And it just felt exciting to be part of a community, especially during such an isolating time.
Yes.
Um, with the pandemic, and then my children have a medical diagnosis. They both have it. It's very
Mhm.
rare. So that's very isolating. So having community and connection has been really important to me in my reading life.
Mhm.
And in this season with my reading, I mean, I don't have a lot of time, but I find time wherever I can. So I read a lot of audiobooks.
Mhm.
We sleep in shifts to take care of our baby because he has to eat every few hours. So
Mhm.
I listen to audiobooks overnight, like when I'm pacing in the kitchen with him, or I read during my lunch breaks, or I listen to an audiobook in the car while I'm driving around quickly, or I want to start picking up books, like physical books in
Mhm.
front of my children's that they see me reading. So I'm really
Yes.
practicing that too.
Mhm.
So I try to fit it in wherever I can, but it is tricky. But finding different, like having it, sadly, I read on my phone a lot, which I know no one likes to do. And I don't like to do it. I truly
Mhm.
don't. But I have my phone and I have a baby and I'll
Yes.
read on my phone.
Mhm.
And it's how I can get it right now. And
Right.
that is, I want to be in a season where I don't have to read like that, but that's
Mhm.
just not what it is right now. And I think if I can get it, I'm going to get it the way I get it.
Yes. I
So,
mean, you have
yeah.
to embrace reading however you can, and I
Yes.
remember those days. I think I got my first iPad right around the time my son was born, and I would read on the iPad again, like while I was nursing, or,
Yep.
in the middle of the night, because it had a light, right? If
And
I
you
was
can
trying to.
adjust the
Yep.
font, which is helping me
Mhm.
these days. Yeah, there's a a lot to love about it, even though it's not
Yes.
ideally what I would want to do, but
Right.
we got to
Absolutely.
read when we got to read.
Exactly. And, and books will always be there. So when that season comes around again, that you can pick up those physical books, they will always be there. And
Yes.
how wonderful is it that we have the technology that you can read in the dark in the middle of the
Yeah,
night?
I mean, it really has saved my reading life. It's
Right?
saved my life just to be
Mm-hmm.
able to you know, fill that time with something that I love. If I
Absolutely.
have to be awake, I would like to be reading.
Yes.
So it's been working.
Wonderful. I love that. I love that. I know one of the things that you like to talk about a lot on your podcast is about the seasons of life and how that affects you, affects your reading. So can you talk a little bit about, how the different seasons affect your reading at this stage of your life right now?
Yeah. I mean, this year, I've been through a few. Like I started
Mhm.
this year with a newborn. So I was home with him and then I went back to work full
Mhm.
time. And then there was the summer, which was a little different. And now my son, he's 4, he just started preschool. So that all of that is like season. And then
Mhm.
I work at a job that works in semesters. So I'm always like ebbing and flowing with a semester starting, a semester ending, semesters. So I
Mhm.
academic year, I'm very tapped into that.
Mhm.
And I'm very affected by my family rhythm, the home rhythm. So like last week, our kids were sick and that threw my reading out the window. Like it went
Mhm.
all topsy turvy. So my reading life is really affected by how everyone is doing around me, how I'm feeling, my health, their health, um, all the things that we have on our plate. So I'm constantly trying to ride those waves of whatever is coming up for us with work or home or health or otherwise. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a constant juggle.
It is. It is. But I think at least the lovely thing about books is even if you have to set something down for a significant period of time, you can always pick it back up, right? It will
Yeah.
always your place will always be kept in that book and you can always start it when you're able to. So I think that's one of the lovely things about reading is that you can always pick it up whenever it works for you. It's not something that you have to wait for something or it has to be at a specific time. Remember the days when you used to have to wait for television shows to come on at
I
a
loved
certain
that.
time?
I
I
talk about that
know,
all the time. I
right?
really miss that.
I know.
Honestly, I liked the waiting. I
Yes.
liked watching everything at the same time. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of beauty in that.
There is.
I think
And
it's good for our spirits to not be like
absolutely.
getting everything all the time, to have to wait a little bit.
Yes. I think that, I do suffer from that information overload
Yeah.
sometimes. And I think that's why I love reading physical books because it slows everything down, right?
It
You
does
have
feel
to,
more grounding.
it
Yeah.
does. It absolutely does. Even, I mean, obviously, I appreciate having things like the Kindle or being able to read on my phone or things like that. It is convenient, but I will always default to wanting to read a physical book. There's just something about it that it changes the way my brain works and how I
Yeah.
take in information. And I think that's so important in this day and age where we get so much information so quickly in such bite-sized chunks that it's good to expand your brain and read something that isn't just a bite-sized piece of information.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I would love to know who or what. I know you've talked a little bit about like the celebrity book club, and I really loved what you said about that in your podcast a couple of weeks ago about the community aspect of that. But I'm curious, what else or who else has been an influence on your reading life?
So community is very important to me, I'm finding.
Mhm.
I also I attribute a lot of my reading influence to a bookstore called the Bookshelf. They're in
Mhm.
Thomasville, Georgia. I talk about
Yes.
them constantly.
Yes.
Um, People are probably tired of me talking about the bookshelf, but they really changed my reading life. They are just a bunch of like-minded, kind-hearted women
Mhm.
who have a great online presence. So I don't live in Thomasville, Georgia, but you don't have to
Right.
feel like so connected to them. So they're like my neighborhood bookstore in my heart.
Yes.
And they have a great Patreon community, so I'm part of
Mhm.
that. So like having community really helps my reading to stay vibrant, to stay exciting. You know, having people to talk about it with has been really helpful for me. Like I don't have a lot of I have a couple of friends who read, but
Mhm,
I would be posting like books on my personal Instagram here and there, and like
mhm,
no one would respond. So that was a big reason why I started the Bookstagram, because I want to talk about books. And that's why I started the podcast. I want to hear about people's reading lives. I want to be connected to readers and know what they're reading and why they're reading and when they're reading. I find it all so exciting and
mhm.
interesting, but not everyone is, I'm learning, reading or excited by books the way I am. So it's important to find those communities, and they are out there, like on
Mhm,
BookTube, Bookstagram. There are people who want to talk about it with you. So
mhm.
that's been very helpful. That's very influential to my reading life. And
Yes.
certain booksellers too, from bookstores. So obviously the bookshelf, also Rayanne from Parnassus Books,
Mm,
Melissa from Old Town Books. They give amazing middle grade recommendations, and I love middle
mhm,
grade in children's
mhm.
literature. So I do like lean on them heavily for recommendations. And your
Yes.
channel too. I
Oh,
find
thank
so many great books from you. Yeah, you really influenced my reading life too, for sure.
Same. I think my last 3 or 4 or 5-star reads have all been because of you,
I'm
so thank
so
you.
thankful when when I heard you talk about them, like, oh, thank goodness, because I'm not good at giving, I think, recommendations, because I get like hypes. Like I don't want people to not like what I like.
Yes.
And I'm afraid like, oh, it's not gonna land well. So I'm so glad that those landed well for
Oh,
you.
they're just brilliantly, really, and
Good.
these days I don't read a ton of new releases, and I feel like you are somebody I can trust when you recommend a new release because I don't trust everybody out there. I've been burned by a lot of
Yeah.
social media in terms of reading new books that just really didn't hit the sweet spot for me. So I really appreciate that. I feel like you and I are very similar in our reading tastes, and that you're somebody whose opinion I can trust. So,
Thank you.
but yes, I know it is hard sometimes to recommend books, isn't it? Like I have a hard time. Sometimes I don't recommend my favorite books because if somebody doesn't like them, then I feel gutted.
Well, that's how I feel about Sipsworth. So
Yes.
I've said it
Oh,
before and I'll say it here. Like that, I love Sipsworth.
oh,
And I was afraid to share about it because I'm like, if people don't like this, I don't want to hear it. Don't
right?
tell me. Don't
Yes.
don't post, don't tag me, don't tell me. I don't want to hear it.
Hmm.
Thankfully,
Yes.
I've shared about it a lot, and thankfully people do seem to love it too. But
Yes.
yeah, I am scared about that. Like I don't want
Yes.
people to not like what I like.
Right? I know.
I don't know what that says about me, but
Well, I
it
can
is
share
scary.
that many of the subscribers to my YouTube channel have also picked up Sipsworth and read it and loved it and have commented to me on that.
Good.
So we, through you, I'm also sharing the love for Sipsworth,
I have
and that
become a
is being,
Sipsworth
yes,
evangelist.
yes. Absolutely, as am I. And it's so funny because I read Simon Van Buie's short story collection, one of them years and years ago, and I just adored it. It was one of my favorite books that year. And then I purchased another copy of his short stories. It's still sitting on my shelf, but I am going to read it this winter. So when you talked about Sipsworth, I was like, "Oh, I know Simon Van Buie. I can't believe I didn't realize he had a novel that was out." And so that was I love when those like kind of
Yes.
bookish serendipity happens where it's, I just was an author I was familiar with and had enjoyed, and then somebody whose opinions I really strongly agree with recommends something, and I thought, "Oh, yes, this is the book
Yeah.
for me."
Yeah, that book checks all my boxes.
Yes. Yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit, like what kind of books are you drawn to?
Well, like with Sipsworth, it's an octogenarian.
Mhm.
It's in the UK. It's
Mhm.
cozy. There's an
Mhm.
animal.
Yes.
um, there's found
Check, check, check.
family. There's yeah,
Right?
it's just like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like this. They talk about tea a lot. I know
Yes.
you love tea.
Oh,
So it's just very cozy. I like cozy, heartwarming, redemptive, hopeful books that you want to hug after. that make you feel better about the world and about being
Yes.
alive. Like they make you feel more alive.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And it touches on grief too in that book. I think I read a lot of books with grief, which
Mhm.
honestly makes me feel more alive. It makes you feel like
Yes.
more appreciative of your life,
Mhm.
and like the meaning of life. So I love that. I love middle grade and children's literature.
Mhm.
I love Mary Oliver and poetry like Wendell Berry. I read Hannah Coulter this year for the first time
Yes,
and I
so did
loved
I.
that. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I wanted to read it for a long time. It was recommended to me and it just wasn't, I guess, the right time because this
Mhm.
year was. And it I have been thinking a lot like I love quiet interior books that just feel really personal. Like I read a
Mhm.
memoir called The Farmer's Wife, which
Yes.
I found it so beautiful because it's really just very reflective, very
Mhm.
personal. It almost reads like her journal.
Mhm.
And that book really stands out for me this year too.
Mhm.
Yeah, just books that you can tell like someone put a lot of heart into them.
Right. Do you have a few other favorite books you'd like to share?
I shared a lot of them there. And
Yes.
Charlotte's Web, I love
Oh,
Charlotte's
yes.
Web, and I think that kind of connects to Sipsworth too. There's a lot that
Yes.
I like an animal in my books. I love
Mhm.
Kate DiCamillo. She has a lot of animals too,
Yes.
but I love her. She talks a lot about light and dark in her
Mhm.
books, and I find that just so beautiful.
Yes.
Um, Sipsworth, Love and Saffron. I
Yes.
shared with you. I
Yes.
love that. I love a short book. So Love and
Mm.
Saffron is short. It
Mhm.
is small, and whenever I see it, I just think, "Yay! I'm going to pick you up again." I've read that book a
Yes.
few times because it's epistolary. It's
Yep.
letters back and forth. I love intergenerational friendship, so that book
Mhm.
has that. Um, I also really love The Comfort of Crows right now, which is actually Reese's book club pick because the author was her high school teacher. So
I
I thought that was awesome.
I know. I just bought that book, so I'm
Oh,
very
you're gonna
excited to
love it
read it.
because
Yes.
you love Mary Oliver too. Like
Mhm.
it's just essays, and her brother did all the illustrations, the paintings in the book,
It's
and
a
they're just
beautiful
so
book.
beautiful. It's one
Mhm.
that you want to have.
Yes.
I have the audiobook too because her voice is really nice. But yeah, it's a book that you can read throughout the year, and it just
Mhm.
makes you feel like more connected to the world around you, which I think
Yes.
is beautiful.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know that Sipsworth is a book that maybe you're reluctant to press it into everyone's hands, but I feel like you do want to press it
Me
into
too.
everyone's
Yeah.
hands. But is there another book you can think of that you feel like you want to share with other book lovers?
I think I also promote Mary Oliver a lot. I think
Yes.
I mean she's pretty popular now with the internet. Her poetry floats around, but there's so many more poems than what are shared. I mean, she has an extensive collection. I actually
Mhm.
own a lot. I think I own almost all of her books,
I love
which is
that.
my like prized collection. I love her so much. So I would definitely like to share Mary Oliver with more people. Kate DiCamillo, there's a series that she has. I think she calls it the Ranchero series. It's
Mm.
like a
Mhm.
three-part friendship story. I
Right.
love the second book in that story, Louisiana's Way Home. Something
Mhm.
about that I really connect to. So I
Mhm.
love all of her work, but I do love that series a lot.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, Sipsworth. I, I'm a big Sipsworth fan. Um, and Charlotte's Web, if you haven't read that, I think everyone should read Charlotte's Web.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love all those recommendations and I second them wholeheartedly. Well, just one final question for you to sort of wrap things up today. But if you had one piece of advice for cultivating a reading life, what would that be?
Hmm. I think for me, it's been community, connection. I think finding people who love to read, even if they don't read the same books as you, just having people to talk about books with and be excited about books with. I think being involved in a local library, getting to know your indie bookstore or finding one online like the bookshelf, like finding people who are talking about books. I think that really helps to keep a book life going. I mean, I have been thinking a lot about how the books that I'm reading, that's my reading life, but my reading life is actually more holistic than that. Like it's also everything I'm taking in that has to do with
Mhm.
reading. So
Mhm.
the booktube channels that I watch, the book podcasts I listen to, the Patreon communities I'm involved with, the bookstores I go to, like all of that influences my reading life. It
Mhm.
makes me excited to be a reader. And I think all of that matters. So, community, connection, finding people to love something with.
Well, I love that. And I love that I have found you and have added you to part of my book community. And I am so happy to be a part of your book community as well. And before we wrap things up today, can you let people know where to find you online?
Yes, so I'm at Meg's Reading Room on Instagram, and you can find my podcast on Apple and Spotify, and I think wherever you can listen to podcasts.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's everywhere.
Yes. I listen to you on Overcast, so I know you can
Ooh,
find it there as well. That's my
okay.
yes. That is my
Great.
podcast, app of choice, I I guess, as you would say. And, for everybody watching, I will have all of Meg's information linked in the description box down below, so you can go find her, subscribe to her podcast. It is so, so
Oh,
lovely. Again, it is my favorite way to spend Wednesday mornings these weeks, so thank you, Meg, so
thank
much for
you.
being here today.
This is such a thrill. I can't believe I get to be with you today. This is so exciting. Thank you.
Well, I have been so happy to have you and to talk books with you and just to have you out in the bookish community because I think you bring so much light and joy to this corner of the internet. And that's what we all need more of these days.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Meg.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Meg, for such a wonderful bookish conversation today. I really enjoyed chatting with you all about your reading life, your podcast, and some of your favorite books. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation with Meg. Please be sure to go and check out Meg's podcast and her Bookstagram account. All her information is linked in the description box down below. Thank you so, so much for watching this, for liking, subscribing, and leave us some comments down below. Have you read any of the books that Meg talked about and shared with us today? Did you find anything new that you want to add to your TBR or anything else bookish you'd like to share? And I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye!